Thank you to eFulfillment Service for sponsoring today's video. Check them out if you plan on publishing your own board game so they can handle the logistics of getting your game out into the world. Considering what feels like every second post on the Board Game Design Lab Facebook group is either a designer sharing a board game they're currently working on that uses AI images, or a designer trying to argue the merits of using generative AI in board game design, and considering more and more board games, including games by established publishers like Stronghold Games, are using AI-generated images, and considering I get asked routinely my opinion on the use of AI in board game design, it's come to a point where we need to talk about this on my channel. So what are AI-generated images in the first place? According to a University of Toronto article, generative image AI refers to artificial intelligence models, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, which are able to create high-quality imagery through text or image prompts. These models are trained on billions of images, the dataset, which are curated for the intended use of the model. But where and how are these images sourced? The U of T article continues, in order to sufficiently train a diffusion model to create high-quality images, the training dataset must be large enough and of high quality. This leads to the main problem with these models, the sourcing of the training dataset. Popular AI image generation models like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion are trained on the LAION dataset, a collection of 5.6 billion images scraped from the internet, including digital artist communities like DeviantArt and ArtStation, along with Getty Images and Pinterest. This has led to a class action lawsuit between a group of artists and the AI research lab Stability AI and Midjourney. So art created by humans is being scraped by these AI models without their consent, without compensation, and without credit. Now, before you say I'm just an anti-AI Luddite, I'm very excited about how AI can help with advances in scientific fields. According to a National Academy of Sciences article, AI is advancing science in a range of ways, identifying meaningful trends in large data sets, predicting outcomes based on data, and simulating complex scenarios. And AI is accelerating research on complex neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. I do believe that AI tools absolutely can be used to help some of humanity's biggest problems. But in creative fields, what problem is generative AI trying to solve? In my opinion, the problem it solves in the board game industry is it helps people who are too cheap and impatient to pay human artists save money. Let's look at an example. I mentioned the publisher Stronghold Games earlier, and they, along with their partner Fricks Games, used AI to generate images for some expansions for their wildly popular game Terraforming Mars. They launched a Kickstarter project for these expansions that earned $2,222,703. In an interview with Polygon, Travis Worthington, the president of Indie Game Studios who owns Stronghold Games, said, "Quite honestly, the use of AI is, let's be honest, it can be a cost saver. But I think the biggest reason why Fricks Games and quite honestly ourselves are using this is not the cost savings, but the development time. You can always equate time with cost, but the time to go through and bring a product to market can be decreased dramatically by using the generative AI." And I honestly just find this statement really sad. To cut out people who create art in the name of profit and efficiency is just a really depressing way to approach life and creative work. So instead of paying human artists, many of whom don't make a lot of money and struggle to pay their bills, instead of supporting those artists, some publishers are choosing to support large tech companies who make millions of dollars in profits from images that are generated by human artists without compensation or consent. Also, some publishers can keep more of the profits and pump out games faster. As you can see in the use of AI section on the Kickstarter page for the Terraforming Mars expansions, Stronghold Games disclosed that they use generative AI in the development of the games. And under the consent section, they say, "We have ourselves neither provided works nor asked for consent for any works used to produce AI-generated content." So they are essentially passing the buck to these AI models and throwing their hands up in the air saying, we don't have control over whether or not these AI models that we choose to use get consent from the artist that they take the art from. There's literally nothing we could do. And now excuse us while we swim in our $2 million Scrooge McDuck style. Now you might say, what about a smaller publisher who has no budget at all and has to use AI images because they just don't have any money to hire an artist? If only there was a platform people could use to raise money to fund their project. Wait a minute. Now I know the way Kickstarter is currently used by creators has changed significantly since it originally came out, but the intent was for creators to raise funds to then do cool things. Now, the product usually needs to be complete before launching a crowdfunding campaign. But I would encourage smaller publishers to hire an artist to create a couple sample pieces that they can use in their crowdfunding campaign. And then if you fund, use some of those funds to pay the artist to make the rest of the art. And if you don't fund, well, you'll have a few pieces of cool art and it's not the end of the world. Now, Kickstarter's policy for creators to disclose their use of AI was introduced in August of 2023. In their announcement for their new AI policy, they say, "Our new policy does not ban the use of AI in Kickstarter projects. However, we want to make sure that any project that is funded through Kickstarter includes human creative input and properly credits and obtains permission for any artist's work that it references." That's interesting because there currently aren't any AI generative tools that scrape art off the internet with the consent from the artists who made that art. Even Travis Worthington said as much in his interview with Polygon. The tools we use are not based on a consent model, nor is there, to my knowledge, any AI tools that are based 100% on a consent model. So if a project on Kickstarter discloses the fact that they use generative AI, that directly implies that consent was not given. So I find it a bit disingenuous that Kickstarter claims they want to ensure that all artists are credited when AI generative models are built on a model that does not require credit, compensation, or consent. And the fact is that generative AI is not going away. In fact, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference if something was made by a human or generated by AI. So I think this statement further down Kickstarter's AI policy announcement better exemplifies how we can address generative AI in board games moving forward. The policy requires creators to be transparent and specific about how they use AI in their projects, because when we're all on the same page about what a project entails, it builds trust and sets the project up for success. Being upfront and transparent about the use of AI is the best way for people to make informed decisions about the products they want to support. Just like how some TV shows are now adding disclaimers to their end credits saying that AI was not used in the making of the show. Like the end credits of the new show Pluribus that says, "This show was made by humans." Or how lo-fi music channels on YouTube have to add the words "no AI" to their titles, or even show themselves playing the instruments on screen so people know that they are actually making the music. I think we're going to see more and more board games with disclaimers on the box saying generative AI was not used in the making of this game. It would be great if companies who do use generative AI would be required to disclose that information on the game box, but I think it's going to be more of an opt-in type situation. And I saw a cool thing the other day. A publisher, Moodbox, explicitly say on their website that they do not want to see game submissions that were created in whole or in part by artificial intelligence. So we're going to see more and more use of generative AI in board games, and I think the best way forward is transparency. Now, there are some people who say they are completely unbothered by the use of generative AI in board games. As one BGG user wrote, "If I like the art, I couldn't care less who, what, how it was made." If you have the luxury of not caring whether or not a board game used AI-generated images rather than hiring a human artist, you likely are not an artist or don't work in a creative field, don't have someone you love in your life who is an artist or works in a creative field. You directly profit off of the use of AI images, whether you work at an AI tech company or you work for a publisher who uses AI generated images, or you aren't aware of the environmental and societal impacts of the use of generative AI. Yeah, the environmental impacts, I haven't even talked about those yet. According to MIT News, the computational power required to train generative AI models that often have billions of parameters, such as OpenAI's GPT-4, can demand a staggering amount of electricity, which leads to increased carbon dioxide emissions and pressures on the electric grid. Beyond electricity demands, a great deal of water is needed to cool the hardware used for training, deploying, and fine-tuning generative AI models, which can strain municipal water supplies and disrupt local ecosystems. And just how much water is used to cool AI hardware? According to a UN Environment Program article, globally, AI-related infrastructure may soon consume 6 times more water than Denmark, a country of 6 million, according to one estimate. That is a problem when a quarter of humanity already lacks access to clean water and sanitation. But let's talk more about the societal impacts of generative AI. A lot of people argue that those who oppose generative AI are just resisting technological progress. And one person on BGG equated it to protesting email in support of postal workers. They wrote, "This is just how technological advancements work. Now I'm going to exaggerate a bit, but refusing to review games with AI art is kind of like refusing to read emails in 1998 because you want to support the local postman. You can't prevent the change from happening, and big technological leaps will always mean some jobs become redundant. And Andrew Lynch, the author of a great article on Meeple Mountain about their decision to not review board games that use generative AI, I'll be sure to include a link to that article below, responded saying, "It's a ridiculous comparison, even adjusting for exaggeration. Delivering the mail is a rote physical task. Creating art in any capacity, not just for board games, is just that, a creative task. I don't have blanket issues with technological advancement, and my concern here is not strictly that AI would render jobs redundant. I move on from that point pretty quickly. My point is larger. The art that makes up our games and the artists who create that art are just as much a part of the board game community as the designers. The art and the game are in many ways inseparable. If they weren't, people wouldn't fume every time a new edition changes how a game looks. This is in part based on a fundamental belief. There are certain tasks I do not believe should be farmed out to computers, and artistic creativity is one of them. It makes all of us poorer." And I absolutely agree with this statement. I find the argument that it's an inevitability that all artists will eventually use generative AI to make their art incredibly cynical. For artists to be removed from the creative process and be reduced to simply entering prompts into an AI generator is so highly dystopian. And I know that some people say that entering the perfect prompts into an AI generator is its own art form. And to that I say,
this is a nightmare!
That is truly the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, and I've watched all 27 seasons of Big Brother.
Well, you Fruit Loop dingus, I bet you didn't see this coming.
Saying that you are an artist because you worked so hard putting in hours of work entering prompts into an AI generator is like saying you worked so hard putting in search term after search term trying to find cute cat sleeping videos on YouTube, and then once you find the perfect one, it's kind of like you made the video yourself, you searched so good. So let me be very clear. Entering prompts into an AI generator is not creating art. Oh my God. In the article, The Evolution of Human Artistic Creativity, the author writes, "Art in its many forms is practiced by almost all human cultures and can be regarded as one of the defining characteristics of the human species. If human-made art ceases to exist and we only consume books, music, and art created by generative AI models, I would argue that would basically be the end of humanity. Because what does it even mean to be a human? We express ourselves, we create, we love, we ask questions, we imagine. To forfeit all of that in the name of profit and efficiency would unravel our very sense of self and society, in my opinion." In addition to Meeple Mountain, other reviewers are taking a stand and will not review games that use generative AI like 3-minute board games.
Kia ora koutou. It's Jay here for 3-minute board games. I just want to clarify our position on AI art. And that position is, we simply will not be covering any games that use AI art for the foreseeable future. Unless something dramatically changes in that space around how AI art is constructed and how it's used and how artists are paid for it, we're not touching it. This is not a debate. This is not a conversation. This is not an invitation for people to come in and tell me exactly why AI art is amazing and why I'm being a stick in the mud and a Luddite and all those other things that I've seen online. This is our choice on the channel, and our choice is to stand by artists. And we will take no part in advertising, supporting, or promoting games that use AI art. Because to me, part of what has made modern board gaming great is the work of so many artists across this field. In the last decade, games have gotten beautiful. And that is because of human-created art. And I think those artists deserve to be recognized, compensated, and supported. And if we at 3-minute board games can do just a little bit to help them, then that's what we're going to do.
On my end, as a consumer of games, I will not buy a game that uses generative AI. And as an indie board game designer, I will not pitch to publishers that use generative AI. And I will seek out publishers who celebrate the artists that they work with, like how 25th Century Games posts art from their games every Friday on their Instagram page. And speaking of celebrating board game artists, I think now would be a great time to showcase some of my favorites. will link to all of these artists' Instagram pages or websites. Be sure to follow them and support their work. And share your favorite board game artists in the comments below. So AI generated images are not going anywhere, and I suspect more and more publishers will use them to cut costs by not having to pay human artists. So what can we do? We can vote with our wallets and support publishers who support human artists and buy their games. Publishers, you can make this easier for us if you add disclaimers to your games that say generative AI was not used in the making of this game or something like that. Board game content creators can follow the example of Meeple Mountain and 3 Minute Board Games and not review or promote board games that use AI generated images. We can all support artists directly by following them on Instagram and buying prints and merch from them directly. And as indie game designers can choose not to pitch to publishers who use generative AI. And what can AI tech companies do? They can compensate, credit, and get consent from the artists for the work that they scrape from the internet and work to reduce their environmental impact on our planet. But I won't hold my breath. At the end of the day, I believe many people, myself included, will continue to make games, books, art, music without the use of generative AI at all. Painters will continue to paint, poets will continue to write poetry, and musicians will continue to write songs from their heart and soul. And as much as AI tech companies will try, those are two things AI generative models will never have.